from like 2020 on, it was pretty obvious that the American church had been pretty bad at discipleship. In general, pick a topic. We didn't do great on any of the topics, and so we made a conscious shift from figuring out ways to get seekers to come to our building to how do we spiritually outfit the people that are in our building and send them out and focus on I'm going to use this buzzword, but we're going to focus on the 167 rather than the 1 hour. And we've gotten our entire staff and congregation on board with that. And it's been incredible to watch. So now instead of counting baptisms, we're counting baptizers. And instead of counting like money that's coming in, we're counting how many givers per month and so on and so on. And what that's done has been this philosophical shift in our community and in our congregation, where they realize that the actual mission field, the actual field is their daily lives, whereas maybe the locker room is the church.
Hey, thanks for tuning in today to the Missional Marketing Podcast. Bart Blair and Jason Hamrock here to entertain you. Well, maybe to entertain you. Maybe you'll find some entertainment to inform you. Yeah, we're here to entertain, we're here to inform, but ultimately, we're here to help your church grow by leveraging digital marketing and effective communications. We love the local church. We want to help local churches all across the country, all across the world, reach more people for Jesus, make more disciples, and make more disciples who make more disciples. And today, we have a very interesting conversation about a church that is doing some very unique and very interesting things to make new disciples. Jason, why don't you introduce today's guest?
Well, our guest I met, I want to say almost 6 years ago at the Church IT Network conference. And I'm like, if you go to Church IT Network conference, you're going to see a lot of IT guys that work in churches.
Pocket protectors, right?
Pocket protectors. Okay. Tyler Sansom, he was not one of those guys. Tyler is, when you listen to this podcast, you're going to be pretty blown away by this guy. I was really impressed with his strategies of what he was doing. This is 6 years ago with what they were doing with digital and social back in those days. He has just exploded. He's got a church. He's actually now the lead pastor of his church. And check this out. It's a small town in Indiana, about 3,500 people in this town. His church has about 1,000 people from that area that attend his church. Go figure that one, okay? So Tyler's done some amazing things. They've got this really cool strategy. I think he's like the online pastor who's now turned into a lead pastor because that has been his journey. And so if you're in kind of the online space, you are going to want to pay attention. We're going to talk about some strategies that they have been implementing and using, and it is producing results. Maybe one of the best in the country. And we're talking a small church, but they're making huge kingdom impact. And so Tyler brings it today. You're in for a treat.
Absolutely. I met Tyler for the first time about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he started sharing with me some of the things that they're doing. And I honestly have not been able to stop thinking about it since. It's just unique, different. I think the things that he shares with us are some things that the church needs to hear. And so, this isn't really an episode about church online. It's about effective church growth, about reaching people in your community, about unique ways to disciple people. There's just a whole lot that Tyler unpacks in this episode. So we think you're really going to appreciate what he shares with us today. We appreciate you tuning into the podcast. We know that you have choices about the way you use your time, about what you listen to while you're on the treadmill or on the commute to work. And we appreciate you tuning into our show. So we'd love to get some feedback from you. Let us know how we're doing. You can do that by leaving us a rating or review wherever you consume the content. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure that you do that so that you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. And with all that being said, here's our interview with Tyler Sansom. Well, it is my privilege to welcome Tyler Sansom to the show today. Tyler, thanks so much for hanging out with Jason and me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Hey, one of the things that we like to do as we get the show started is just to hear a little bit of the backstory of the guests that we're interviewing. So why don't you take a few minutes to just sort of tell the very interesting story about sort of how you ended up in ministry and what you've been doing lately, how you ended up where you are today.
Yep. So I grew up playing football. I'm from a very football-driven community. Like die hard, the town shuts down for all the high school games and the college games kind of community. So that was ingrained in my being. And my goal in life was to make it and play in college, get a scholarship to play in college. And so I spent most of my adolescence in high school dreaming about that, focusing on that, working towards that. And finally, out of high school, I ended up having like 13 scholarship offers. Got to go play ball. It was the dream scenario. My best friend since I was 5 and I got to play together at the same school. We roomed together. And then the first game, I broke my neck. And it was devastating. So I still had this dream in my mind. After it healed and all that stuff, I transferred to a much smaller school called Kentucky Christian. And I didn't really have any interest in going into ministry or any of that stuff. But the coach that was there had just come out of the NFL. And I feel like God placed him in my life to lead me into ministry. Because right before our first game, we were having our final scrimmage and I broke my arm the next season. And so this dream of playing ball was kind of sidelined pretty quickly. And my coach took me aside and he had kind of really spoken into my life and said, I think God has a different plan for you. I've always been pretty musically inclined. And so shortly after I broke my arm, I had a church in a place called Corydon, Indiana, which is a place I'd never heard of, randomly call me and say that through a couple mutual friends, they had heard me lead worship on a 4th of July event, and they wanted to know if I'd be interested in coming to be their worship pastor. And I was 19 at the time. So I left school and came to First Capital when I was 19, and I was there for about 3 years. And mega church world was really appealing to about a 22-year-old worship guy. So I got to go lead worship at a really large church called Northview Church in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And I was there for about 10 months and realized that I had a lot of pride when it comes to leading worship, and I loved the spotlight and the stage. And I felt like God was telling me, you need to go do something else. This is not healthy for you. I've got something bigger for you. So I called First Capital back and I basically told them those things. And I told them, I don't know what it is yet, but is there any chance I could come back? I will clean the floors. Like that was kind of the conversation. And graciously, they welcomed me back in a online pastor role, which was way before online pastors were cool. So 2015, I got to start doing online ministry. And we started something called Church Anywhere that really blew up. Since then, we've been able to baptize somewhere around 500 people just through online and microsite connections. And then our lead pastor, who was there for 19 years, decided that it's time for him to retire. He's almost 70. And last year, they approached me about becoming the next lead pastor here. And this January, I got confirmed. So I'm almost 4 months on the job right now.
Wow. And you haven't broken anything, right? Nothing's...
Not so far. The church is still standing, so like everything's okay right now.
Well, I met Tyler years ago at the Church IT Network conference, and it was fun. Got to hang out with this guy, and he taught me quite a bit, just from what this church is doing. Literally in the sticks, out there in the sticks, and they are making a huge impact. And one thing you taught me, Tyler, and I mentioned this earlier, and I'm going to say it here again, is when it comes to like social media engagement, when you're trying to make an impact and reach more people, don't go it alone. Recruit a team of volunteers, not only just to post stuff, but to actually respond and be your team that's going to, make comments and share and like and all that kind of stuff. Expand on how did you come up with that? Where did that go? And how's that innovation of yours and where you're thinking that through being creative, how's that driven you to do what you do today?
Yeah. So like in 2015 or so, when we first jumped online, we knew that social media would be a huge part of it. When I say jumped on online, I don't mean just like throwing our service on there. We had made a conscious decision to try to use the internet like as a tool for ministry. And so we knew social media would be huge, but back in those days, it was like the Wild West on Facebook because there wasn't a lot of churches, there weren't a lot of businesses that were using it for engagement. They were using it like a big bulletin board, basically. Wow. And it was a little bit before advertising was a main focus for Facebook. So when we first started, the algorithm would just pump our stuff out to everybody. I mean, we had organic reach out like crazy. But then around 2017 or so, the algorithm shifted. It was like a big, great panic moment for lots of churches because no longer were they able to put a random post out and get it seen by 10,000 people. They were getting it seen by like 50 people.
Yeah.
Because Facebook switched towards engagement rather than just this organic reach. So I knew at that point, we got to do something different. We got to prime the pump in some way. And myself and a couple of our volunteers got together one evening and went through all these different options of what we could do. And we came up with the street team is what we called it at the time. And then it became social media team because street team sounded a little not ministry-like for our people. But yeah, we came up with that idea basically in like one evening and then just launched it. And ever since then, have been adjusting it for the algorithm.
Wow. Yeah. How are you? So you just mentioned today you have all these like microsites. Talk about what that looks like. And because you said something that caught my attention, that you literally will call out people and go, "Hey, that's really cool that you're doing that. How are you using that for the kingdom?" I love that line because it makes people think. So talk a little bit about your strategy with those sites.
Yeah, for us, it's a twofold strategy. Obviously, we want new people to hear the gospel. That's a huge part of it. New people to hear the gospel and new people to be discipled. But on the flip side of that, we want microsite leaders to feel empowered to follow something that they're passionate about, and then for us to give them some structure to actually use that passion for a purpose in the kingdom. And microsites are one of those ways. So for us, a microsite looks like our central team, our staff providing digital content that's 30 minutes long, and then giving that to we'll say an institutional thing like a jail. So we give 30 minutes of content to a jail, and then a leader from either our online campus or in-person campus actually being in that jail with them, with the team, and then doing small groups after the 30 minutes of content. And these have been tailored for all these different types of places: recovery centers, jails, hospitals, elementary schools, in people's homes, wherever it is. We want to take someone's passion area of where they want to serve, and then outfit them with the digital tools to kind of make that happen with some structure, specifically in the microsite area.
And those pop up all over,
yeah.
Right? Just not just around your own community.
Yeah, they're as far away as Kenya and as close as the local county jail.
Wow.
Can you break down a little bit of what the content looks like that your team is creating for the microsites to use?
Yeah, it really depends. This has been something that's grown over the years. It really depends on the type of person that we're reaching. So, for example, in a home campus, like just in a neighborhood, there's one that's about an hour away from here called Salem. That's the name of the town, and we just send them a cut down version of the weekend sermon. But for like a recovery center, we've got an 18-part series that we just use kind of on a rotation. That's specifically for them. So it's still messages, still by our team, but we've shot those in advance and we kind of go through a rotation. Typically, people are at a recovery center for 6 months to 9 months. So that 18 part series kind of gets them all the way through if they stay through one round of treatment. And so we can just kind of loop those back and forth because new people are constantly coming in, and we'll change them up every couple of years. But that's the kind of thing that we do. It'd be similar. We have one at an orphanage, so we make some more youth-oriented things. We have one at a YMCA for children whose parents are in prison. That was somebody's passion, and so we've made content for them. It really just depends on the audience.
Wow.
Oh, okay, I'm a little bit old school, so help me understand this. So if I go to one of these microsites, you're going to hand me a bulletin? Are we going to sing songs? Are you going to pass an offering basket? Like literally just people hanging out, consuming content, then having conversation about it. That's what it looks like.
Yeah. And then we, if they've given their life to Jesus, or if they're interested in learning what it looks like to be a Jesus follower, then we'll do baptisms in bathtubs or horse troughs or whatever's available. And then we'll pair them one-on-one with somebody who will walk beside of them for the first 6 weeks of their journey, and hopefully beyond that. But we have digital tools that we've created that literally is 6 weeks, every single day, something that someone can walk beside of someone who's a new follower of Christ, no matter where they're at. And so that's kind of what it looks like. People hanging out. Sometimes they sing. If the microsite is not super interested in singing, then we don't put singing in the content. We kind of just lean on the leaders to help us understand what content works best. But our goal is just to have people who are passionate about something, pursuing that for the kingdom, and then out of that, more people find their passion and they break out and make another microsite because they've found their purpose for the kingdom, and so on and so on.
That is amazing. Okay, yeah, I gotta say the obvious. You're not a typical lead pastor. You're an online pastor who's figured out how to do online ministry and reach people anywhere, wearing the title of lead pastor. Because this is so innovative, because I have so many conversations with online pastors. They were elevated. They were the student pastor. Now they're the online pastor, or they are hired to be an online pastor. They haven't figured out what that even looks like. You guys have figured that out. You have figured out how to go out and create these microsite kind of burst things. And then whatever's happening there, from there, they keep growing. And what a cool, I guess in my hearing this, it's clicking with me that you've had this ability to be the online pastor for so long. Now you're the lead pastor. You're just doing what you've done in that experience, and you're just taking it as the lead pastor. Is that so? Your focus isn't necessarily cheeks in the seats on the weekend at the main campus. It's about how we keep growing our microsites. Is that accurate? Or
yeah, we've made a conscious switch. And this is a bigger conversation probably, but from 2020 on, it was pretty obvious that the American church had been pretty bad at discipleship. In general, pick a topic. We didn't do great on any of the topics, and so we made a conscious shift from figuring out ways to get seekers to come to our building to how do we spiritually outfit the people that are in our building and send them out and focus on I'm going to use this buzzword, but we're going to focus on the 167 rather than the 1 hour. And we've gotten our entire staff and congregation on board with that. And it's been incredible to watch. So now instead of counting baptisms, we're counting baptizers. And instead of counting money that's coming in, we're counting how many givers per month, and so on and so on. And what that's done has been this philosophical shift in our community and in our congregation, where they realize that the actual mission field, the actual field is their daily lives, whereas maybe the locker room is the church.
Where do you get your inspiration?
Well, our lead pastor for the last 19 years was a former college basketball coach. And so he and I speak very similar language and are on the same wavelength. So marrying his innovative spirit coming from the basketball world to the pastor world, and then what we've been able to accomplish online, I think that what you're seeing with this spiritual outfitting is a convergence of those two things.
Wow.
It's very fascinating to me. I want to rewind just a little bit, because I think, when I hear Jason say this, and it made a lot of sense to me. You're an online pastor, or a guy who was doing online ministry, and now you've kind of taken what you've learned there and moving that into more incarnational ministry. And I see what you're doing, and it does make a lot of sense. One of the things that I think a lot of us perceive is that online ministry, or church online, is designed to be something that, husband and wife and kids do in the living room of their house with the smart TV tuned into the weekend worship service being broadcast from the campus of their church, right? The honest truth is, most churches are having a really, really difficult time getting over that hump. And we've had a lot of conversations on this podcast about what online ministry is, what church online really ought to look like. And in some ways you're doing that. But the one piece that seems to be missing in so many different churches' paradigm for church online is this incarnational community where people are actually together. And you haven't lost that in your priority with what you're doing. I mean, you could feasibly take the content that you're creating for the microsites and just deliver it all through YouTube, deliver it all through an app, deliver it all, in some sort of virtual online experience. But it sounds like you really worked hard to make sure that people are gathering, whether it's a group of 5 or a group of 50, people are together incarnationally. Can you just kind of double click on that, kind of give us a little bit of insight as to what drives you to make sure that that's a consistent part of the ministry that you're doing?
Yeah, it still goes back to this philosophical shift, because if we just put things out on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, I mean, that's fine. We still do some of that. But for the most part, the focus there is vanity metrics. Like I don't, like if I had 1 million people watch a video, but nobody ever came to Christ or nobody learned anything about Jesus, then like, did I really actually accomplish something? Yeah. So this philosophical shift for us really kind of forces us into focusing on keeping the main things. And one of those things has to be community element. Like we're designed to be communal beings. God himself is communities. It's the Godhead of 3 in 1. And so for us to just say, well, it's fine if you just go watch by yourself and never talk to anyone and never ever meet up with anyone, I'm not sure that's biblical. I'll probably get like crucified by other online pastors for saying that, but that's okay. We have just made it very clear what we're trying to accomplish, which is helping people find and follow Jesus. And we want to come alongside of you in relationship to make sure that happens. And I think the best way to do relationships is the best way is face to face. If not, then the best way is constantly being involved in the other person's life via chat. But the worst way is just throwing some content out there and hoping people watch it.
I totally agree with that. I mean, because in these conversations with lots of online pastors, you're probably an online. If you're listening and you're an online pastor, you know what we're talking about. You're wanting that engagement, but to what end? You can only have so deep of a conversation and relationship with somebody that you've never met before face to face. I mean, you can have some of that, but I think there's a point where you're like, it just starts to fade off because, you don't get to see them and give them a hug or shake their hand, man, or, go have lunch together. I think that's what you're saying. And that's where life happens. And you guys have created this cool model where it's just reproducible over and over again. And you're not really bound by, miles, right? You could do it all the way around the other side of the world. It doesn't really matter. You just have that's the community that they're connected to.
Yeah. And, that's like even the one across the world. So take the Kenya microsite, for example. Our team, the guy's name's Peter. That's the leader of it. And our team is in constant communication with Peter. And I love Peter like a brother. It's amazing because I've known him for years now and I've never met him in person. But I would tell you that my relationship with him online is nowhere near his relationship with the microsite congregants. And so that's where this balance comes into play. Online relationships are very real relationships, but they still don't replace in-person relationships. So our goal is to present the gospel through online means, but then also facilitate actual relationships through those tools that we give them.
Wow. Tyler, let me ask you another question here. I'm totally fascinated by this.
I know.
Okay, so you have this community of people, First Capital Church, who for the most part are traditional brick and mortar church people. And you have a sizable congregation that gathers for weekend worship. And then you have this totally separate thing with the microsites and the ministry and the mission there. It's not purely Neil Cole's organic church where it's just multiplying and replicating and nobody's really, managing it, but it's also not, these are not long, how do I put this without being degrading? I don't mean to be. They are not, right now, they probably couldn't exist outside the leadership and the guidance that First Capital is giving them because of your leadership structure and because of the way that you're creating content. So they're not self-sustaining churches to some degree. Maybe they could be, but they're not. So how do you work with the tension there between, hey, we've got kind of this traditional brick and mortar church experience that we're doing. We also have this microsite thing. How do those two communities function together kind of under the same roof with leaders, with church, without having divided intentions or divided vision there? I'm just curious as to what kind of struggles you're having or what kind of wins you're finding in that.
Yeah. So keep in mind, we're 7 years in to this. So it's not like we started it a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
So if you'd asked me this question 5 years ago, I would have a different answer than I do now because there were a lot of struggles at the beginning. But first of all, nobody understood it. The very first time that I pitched microsites to our eldership, setting the budget, it was literally the first thing that got cut the next year's budget because they didn't get it. And I basically went to them and said, I will buy the equipment out of my own pocket if you just let us try one of these things. But what you cannot argue with is life change. like under any circumstance, things you can't argue with are, I was here, then I met Jesus through this tool, and now I'm here. And we just started seeing story after story after story of people coming to the Lord through these microsites. And every time we would have one of those stories, we'd share it with our brick and mortar congregation. And finally, you'd start to see like there's a light bulb going off there and there's a light bulb going off there, until finally they were like, man, not only are we doing this cool thing, but they're part of us. And so now I know a lot of people liked the word phygital a long time ago, and now it's kind of like not a cool word, but we really have truly become a phygital church. We've got an online staff and an in-person staff that are merged together, working in community with each other, creating these like hyper online in-person experiences constantly. And so everything that we do has become truly phygital, but it took a lot of years of confusion and a lot of years of what the heck are we doing? But the biggest thing I could tell you is that you can't argue with life change. And that's what we've seen the Lord do through this. And so that's how they've become sustainable for us. And obviously, the longer that people are in discipleship type communities together, the more generous they become and things like that. So we're getting revenue coming in from these microsites. We're getting, even in like jails and prisons, we're getting multiple checks a week from inmates who think that they're part of us because they are. And so they're giving their tithes and offerings to the big fund.
Wow.
Hey, Bart Blair here. I'm the producer of Missional Marketing's Church Growth Interviews podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. At Missional Marketing, we're passionate about helping churches reach more people for Jesus online. And one of the ways that we do that is by helping churches acquire more new visitors to their website utilizing the Google Ad Grant. Google offers qualifying nonprofits, including churches, up to $10,000 a month in advertising. That means that you, as a church, could be using Google as one of your primary digital outreach strategies to communicate the gospel and reach more people in your community. If you'd like to learn more, visit our website at missionalmarketing.com and click the link at the top of the page that says Google Grants. We'd love an opportunity to partner with you in your mission to build God's kingdom here on earth. Well, thanks again for listening to our podcast. And now back to the show.
No offense to Jeff Reed, but I've never thought phygital was a very cool word. So I'm going on record for saying I've never really thought that was very cool.
Well, but you guys are doing it. That's the
thing. Jeff's the first person I ever heard that word. And I was on the Zoom call for the 2016, it was a Church IT Network conference, 2016 leadership team. And that's the first time I'd ever heard that. So I think Jeff coined that word on that Zoom call, because he just said, like, he said it and then he was like, I think I just made up a new word. But no offense to Jeff.
He's got a lot of leverage out of it. That's for sure.
I still like that word. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I like because you guys are actually doing it. Well, I think what a lot of churches want to do, you're doing it. And like Bart said earlier, I think people think online guy is the guy that's just connecting with the family sitting in their in their family room watching church because they didn't want to go to church today. They're just going to watch church, and that's nothing wrong with that. But you guys have momentum. You have movement.
So outside of the microsites, just to your point, Jason, our online strategy from just an online ministry standpoint, I would say probably online weekend service is like lowest on the totem pole for us. It's right there with communications. I'm going to offend everybody. I know I am. But like, it's right up there at the same level as like announcement that needs to be posted in church group. And we have really just focused on relational online ministry. So finding hurting people and then providing them with relationships and tools to speak into those hurting areas. And that's been our primary focus for the online campus. So we really don't put a whole lot of effort into our streaming. We want it to be quality, but it's not our Super Bowl.
Yeah. So when you were going through the COVID season initially, where everything kind of, everything went online, where you weren't able to meet in person. Are there any specific things that you guys learned or experienced in that process that has actually elevated what you're doing with microsites and what you're doing in that space?
Out of COVID, I would say that we learned the shorter the service time, probably the better, when specifically in terms of content. But to be honest, guys, and I don't want to sound at all conceited or arrogant in any way, like, we were already doing this for a while before COVID. So nothing really changed that much, except we had a different background behind us when we were giving messages and things like that. But we still focused on relational ministry. We still focused on helping people be discipled online. And we just happened to have a lot more volunteers at our disposal when COVID hit, because everybody was kind of at home. So it was like a strategy already in place. And then we got to unleash a bunch of people that had a bunch of time on their hands.
Hey, we only have a few minutes left, and there is something I want to kind of back up and double click on as you were sharing a little bit about the metrics, things that you're counting, what you're measuring these days. Since you and I had a conversation about this a few weeks ago, my brain has been spinning. I've been reading Will Mancini's new book, Future Church, which I recommended to you. I recommended to Jason. I recommended to a lot of people because I think it really is. There's a paradigm shift in there. And you guys, I think, are already moving in the direction that he's now saying churches need to be thinking and moving towards. But you talk about counting baptizers and not just baptism, counting givers and not just the offering. What are some of the other metrics that you have kind of shifted in? And what have you seen as a result in shifting some of those metrics?
Yeah, so the shift happened in December of 2021. It goes back to my online world days. So this shift had happened in the online space for us since 2017. And then in December of 2021, right before the transition happened for lead pastor, we started shifting metrics then. So we would have a benchmark, and then we have 4 months of metrics now because it's April. So we have identified, we call them the big five. It's 5 things that we want a disciple to be doing. It's generosity, being in community, having a good prayer life, serving, and then right thinking about God. And so those are the areas that we've identified metrics that if we're outfitting people to use them in their daily lives, here are the areas we want to track. So for things on that same line, we have things like baptisms and baptizers, but we also have, every time there's a baptism, we want 1-to-1 them to be paired with a next step guide. And that's literally a person who's been trained and given 6 weeks of digital resources to walk beside of a new believer for 6 weeks, to steady them as they go. So we don't focus on putting them in a class or anything like that. It's very, very much individual relationships. And then by the end of that, we hope that relationship has blossomed and it goes beyond 6 weeks. We just outfit them with 6 weeks of material. We also count number of givers. And that includes any opportunity to be generous. So that could be like a special offering that's given. We adopted a school this year. And so that could be if somebody gives towards the school, because we want people to take that next step to become generous, not necessarily just to fill up the offering numbers. We also count connection opportunities. So that could be a life group, but that also could be like a one-off grief share class, or it could be like we have nights of worship. So people that come to these nights of worship or prayer experiences or whatever that is. We also developed an app called One Step Closer that every day sends a push notification and basically gamifies discipleship to where they get 3 challenges to do things that Jesus did, live like Jesus, and think the way that Jesus thinks. And there's 3 different challenges every day. So we want people to not only download that app, but we want them to use it every day. So those are the types of metrics that we have on one side of our spreadsheet. By the end of that, we add all of those numbers together and get an average per month. And then we multiply that average by 0.75 to be as conservative as we possibly can be. So we have a number of people that we believe we've outfitted on the big 5. Then on the flip side of that, we count our total reach. So that would be online attendance, microsite attendance, and in-person attendance. Then we take the outfitting number and we divide it by the reach number. And by the end of each month, we have a percentage of people that we've outfitted. So over a long span of time, we can hopefully consistently go up on the percentage of people outfitted, and then also the reach, and also the number of people outfitted. But if any of the 3 dip, then we can go back in and specifically pinpoint the areas where we're struggling in. So over time, we've got this kind of picture of health of our church, of how healthy are we in creating disciples that are living it out in their daily lives. So far, we've seen attendance increase giving increase and number of baptisms increase exponentially since we started this. But those are the byproducts of focusing on the main thing. So we're still early on in this hypothesis. We're still early on in this experiment, but so far we're seeing pretty amazing results, especially in the walking beside of people category. These next step guides. I think last month we had 18 total baptisms, and I think we had 18 next step guides, which was like a praise God moment.
Well, I love those because when somebody makes that decision, then you're equipping them to feed themselves.
Yeah,
right?
That's the goal. Yeah, and then they reproduce and they become a next step guide, and so on and so on.
Yeah, you're measuring, you're flipping the table with lead measures and lag measures, right? So we've always kind of used this metric that if we get more people in the building, we can get more people in groups, then we can disciple more people. And you're flipping that around and basically saying, if we disciple more people, then we'll probably have more people show up on Sundays, and we'll have more people get in groups, and we'll have more people giving. It's I hate to say it, Tyler, but I think you're onto something here.
So it sounds like you spent a minute or two thinking about this too.
Yeah, we've been thinking for a while on this one. One last thing about the lead measures and lag measures. What's been really interesting is that everything I just said, I would consider a lag measure, because quarterly now we're meeting as an entire staff organization, both online and in person, and we are coming up with the lead measures. So here's what the lag measures show us that we need to improve on. So in the next quarter, here are the lead measures we believe will help us improve those lag measures. And that's how we can continue to increase this percentage. So instead of like a big year or 5-year plan, we are literally working quarter to quarter right now. And that helps everyone feel like they're on the same page, moving towards one specific vision.
Yeah, we did the same thing similar here at Missional Marketing, where we have our WIG, wildly important goal. We have our lead measures, all that stuff, and it changed our business. It helped us stay really focused, and kudos to thank you, Lord, working through you. You've done that at your church, where you've got a really focused mission, and it's so cool to hear these numbers. I can't wait to. You need to write a book about this. That's your next.
I don't know about all that. We're doing so many creative content creation pieces that I don't know if I have time to do anything else.
Yeah, guys. It's funny. Guys that are doing it, guys that are in the middle of it, they're the ones that never have time to write.
They don't have time. They don't have time.
When it all slows down and you have time to write a book, it's time to try something new, right? So,
right.
Tyler,
we probably need to land this, but I do have what do you think God's leading you to for the next few years? You feel like this is exactly where we're going to go and you're going to play the course here? Or are there other things that you're thinking about?
Yeah, right now I think that we're gonna hold on steady to this course that he has us on, since it's so kind of new. I'm excited to have like a year's worth of data to really figure out, like, does this spiritual outfitting thing work? What needs to be tweaked to make it work? Because honestly, we're in a unique situation to where if we could get, we're at 34% was our highest so far. So what if it was 60? We're in a town of 3,500 people. If we had 60% of our people that we believe are taking a step closer to Jesus every day, we could legitimately change our community. And so that's what I'm excited about, to continue working this process, continue to allow the Holy Spirit to literally move in individual people's lives and help come alongside of them and let them pursue those passions. I think we could see a whole new Harrison County, Indiana, and beyond in the next 10 years.
Oh man, I tell you what, I would love, and you need to say yes right now on the spot. Come back a year from now on the podcast, because I want to hear the results of what's been going on. I can't wait to see that data.
Sure.
I can send you a meeting invite. If I send you a meeting invite and you say yes, I'll hold you to it. Okay. All right. Hey, Tyler, this has been totally fascinating. I can't imagine that there aren't some people listening or watching this that don't have some more questions, that are going to want to just pick your brain a little bit. You have limited time. We appreciate you giving us the time that you did today. If people do have questions, they want to follow up, they're curious about anything that you've talked about here today, what's the best way for them to connect with you or to find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah, through Facebook, it would be a good one. Just look up my name, or my email is tyler@churchanywhere.us. So that's pretty easy to remember.
Tyler, why?
Yeah, and then I run I help run a Facebook group called Online Plus Digital Church Leaders, and so it's a fairly large group. You can always find me in there as well.
It's a big group. but you're in there somewhere. Okay, good stuff. Tyler, on behalf of the Missional Marketing team and all of our friends out there, we really appreciate you taking the time with us today. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.